Welcome to the Inkle Expert Access Series. Today we're speaking to Praveen Gupta. Praveen is an experienced executive with a history of exponentially growing technology companies. Praveen has worn many hats in his career, including advisor, CEO, COO, and CFO. But today we're going to ask Praveen to put on his CFO hat and speak to us about the role and responsibilities of the CFO in today's typical mid-size organization. Praveen, welcome.
Thank you, Robin.
Okay, before we get into the questions, can you walk us through your background?
Sure. I'm a chartered accountant or a CPA these days, but I have my CA and CMA. But have been running technology companies for the past 25 plus years, but have also dipped my toes into various other businesses, including retail, consulting, retirement homes, hospitality, etc. So I was lucky enough or fortunate enough to gain varied experience during my career.
That's awesome. Can you describe the primary responsibilities of a CFO or a head of finance?
Sure. For me, a CFO is a partner not just to the CEO, but to the management team, the investors, and the board. Today's CEO is not a bean counter, but plays an active role in strategy, operations, which obviously encompass HR, sales, marketing, product. But on top of it, a CFO has to lead and be a true partner to the management team in things that are at the top of companies' minds, especially if you look at environmental issues, social issues, and the governance aspects of a company today. These are at the top of the mind, and I think a CFO today can lead in all of these initiatives for a company. Finally, there are the growth and sustainability initiatives that a CFO should lead for divestitures, through divestitures and mergers and acquisitions. Obviously, as a CFO, they should know their numbers, but they should also have a deep understanding of the business, the systems and the processes, the pricing, metrics that drive the business, to just name a few. One needs to have both a 10,000-foot view, but also a ground level view or a 10-foot view, which is for your normal day-to-day operations. A 10,000-foot view is really for strategy and sustainability, but on a day-to-day basis. Let me give you a couple of examples. A company is signing the contract with a customer. The CFO should get involved before the contract is signed, because there could be revenue recognition aspects. A contract could give you cash up front, but revenue could not be recognized, which means you'll not meet your financial numbers. Or the other way around, your revenue can be recognized, but cash doesn't come. It's dependent on some deliverables. What a CFO has to assess, is my company able to deliver these deliverables within the time frame? Then there is the issue of taxation. What are the pitfalls? What are the opportunities? How do we address these pitfalls and opportunities? They should be aware of. I don't expect a CFO to be a tax expert. For that, you have professional accounting firms where they're tax experts. But recognize the opportunity and go to these tax experts for further advice. Then finally, I feel budgets are another important responsibility of a CFO. A budget, when I say budgets, I'm not just talking about preparing the budgets. These budgets are prepared generally a year in advance or the previous year. Do they still hold true? At any point in the company, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, the assumptions we made in 2021, do they hold true in September of 2022? Should we still be hiring people that we put in, or should we still be having that spend? And what sort of made us even more realize this even more was the 2008-2009 financial meltdown. Things that held true in 2007 didn't hold true in 2008 or 9. Similarly for the pandemic now that we are in. Even what you did in 2021, a budget you came up in 2021, hey, nobody thought we would have this kind of inflation. Stock markets were going up. Now all of a sudden stock markets are going down. Valuations are down. Become very hard to raise money, etc. So all these things are really under the realm of a CFO, and they need to be on top of them.
Okay, great. So, for a small to medium sized organization that might be looking to hire a CFO or head of finance, what should they be focused on and what should they look for in candidates?
So, I don't think one size fits all. I mean, I've been mainly involved with startups. So think about a startup where a founder has a financial background or is well versed in finances. They need to look at supplementing their skills when they bring in a CFO. These could be anything, right? These could be a mergers and acquisition experience, a public company experience, a regulation experience, regulatory environment experience, etc. Earlier, the trend was finance was sort of an afterthought. You'd start with a clerical staff and bring in a CFO, etc. After development staff was a priority. Nowadays, VCs insist on a very strong head of finance. Another aspect to think about is if raising capital is not a priority, hire a VP or a director of finance. I feel those are the things. That's the main thing that distinguishes a CFO from a VP finance. Let's say somebody with a finance that has raised capital in their previous career. If financing is a priority and you don't have that in-house expertise in the CEO or other, say, CTO or other senior management team, then definitely bring somebody that has experience fundraising. Mm-hmm. Many startups think they need to bring in somebody that can roll up the sleeves, meaning that somebody who can actually do bookkeeping. Again, I think that's a folly. Hire somebody like Enco to do what's their core business, which is bookkeeping. Again, this is not your core business. Your core business is product, development of product, selling that product. Coming to a medium-sized company should look within first. Is there somebody that I can promote to be the CFO? Because they would already have experienced the understanding of the business, the pricing, and so on. So they would be much better suited than bringing in somebody from outside, as there will be a learning curve. Then finally, company needs to focus on what stage of growth. They have to ask, what stage of growth am I in? Am I looking for an IPO in next 2 to 5 years' time? Am I going to be in regulatory environment? Am I looking to acquire companies? Are we going to grow by acquiring companies? Or do we want to get acquired 2 years from now? So then you bring in a CFO with that kind of expertise. A CFO has to fit in the strategy of the company. I'll give you an example. At FEMI, when I was looking to replace my CFO, I was looking for somebody with business acumen, a team spirit, but at the same time, professionalism to deal with investors, to partners, my board, give me a hand in all these on these activities. But at the same time, have the cultural fit. And I also wanted somebody who could challenge me on my thought process, but yet be open to seeing my point of view and truly adding value. That makes sense?
Yep, makes perfect sense. So next question, a typical small to medium-sized business doesn't really have the budget to hire, a full-scale accounting staff. So what roles or functions would you prioritize and why?
So again, as I said earlier, right, I'm a firm believer, it's not your core business. Sub it out, outsource it. A startup cannot have the luxury of having two people for proper internal controls, for example. One person receives the cash, other person enters it into the books. And this division of labor, it has nothing to do with trust, well, partly trust, but really from a governance standpoint. If you don't have these internal controls, your cost of audit will go up because now the auditors have to do substantive tests. So my thing is outsource the entire accounting function, including financial statement presentation, so to someone who is in that core business. And I have outsourced in my last 3 companies, and I found it very efficient and cost effective. And it resulted in both explicit and implicit savings for me. I didn't have to train people when I talk about implicit costs. I didn't have to worry about, somebody not being around when I needed them.
Mm.
I could have my team focus on bigger things, better analysis, etc.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, then the people you would have in-house are people who are truly core to the business and the strategy and direction of the business, and roles like bookkeeping, payroll, some of the non-core functions, you would say outsource those and let somebody else with that expertise manage those functions.
Definitely.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Okay. So when tasked to develop a company's sort of financial strategy, what principal factors should CFOs always be considering?
Sure. Again, no one size fits all. Every company is different. So let me sort of talk about three types of companies. Let's talk about a pre-revenue company, a company with revenue, and a company that's experiencing explosive growth. A pre-revenue company has to focus on costs. That's all they have. But at the same time, they have to also think about time to market. Where is my product at today? When would it be ready for the market? How do I finance to break even? At what stages do I raise capital? If you raise capital up front, you're giving up a whole bunch of equity at a lower valuation. As you achieve milestones, your valuation goes up, and that's where you should be bringing in capital. I've talked about a just-in-time resources, or I follow what I call just-in-time resources. Long ago, did a Dell case study, and that's where I brought in that concept. And this applies to every resource, whether it's cash, space, people, etc. One needs to come up with a solid operational and financial plan that takes into account the company's strategy and lays out assumptions that considers anything that can be foreseen, but at the same time provides for a contingency. The key in all this budgeting process is you have to balance growth with the costs. Don't suffocate growth over costs, but still ensure the most effective and efficient utilization of resources, nor do let costs get out of hand. Now let's jump to company with revenue. Obviously, all of what I said applies, but one needs to ask, what do I need to support this growth for the company? Do budget scenarios. I like to do, the best case, the optimum case, and the worst case scenario, which is really, the hyper growth, baseline growth, and let's say a decline in revenue. Then the next step I follow is I discuss it with my team to fine-tune all of these scenarios. Now let's go to an explosive growth company. You need to figure out, okay, this is the growth we're experiencing. What resources do I need? When do I need them? And when I talk about resource, obviously it's, as I said earlier, cash, people, space, infrastructure. In addition, distribution channels, global outreach. What's the timing of all of this? And what's the availability of all of the above? Especially in an environment like, say, maybe not today, but go last year, where everybody was experiencing this explosive growth. The environment became very competitive. So, as I said, availability of these resources becomes important. Mm. Your hiring practice should take into account your past successes and failures, especially when it comes to sales teams, because sales, again, affects the ability to keep growing that, keep experiencing that explosive growth. But it should also take into account need for recruiters. That will affect your burn, and also the timing, maybe, market conditions. But also have an offshore strategy. Again, there may be certain elements of your development that are no longer core. You may just develop an engine at one point, but it doesn't need any further development. Then offshore that. But an offshore strategy also needs to take into account what do you need internally to support that offshore development. Mm-hmm. That's a key where companies falter and their offshore strategy doesn't work. Or it could just be not even an offshore strategy, it could just be an outsourcing strategy. Mm-hmm. And coming back to outsourcing bookkeeping, again, if your CFO is not well versed in managing that outsource resource, then it'll fall apart. Mm-hmm. So you need that. Finally, or not finally, a couple more points. One is global exposure. You need to have a plan for global exposure, especially if you have one, which could just be currency fluctuations. You raise capital in US dollars. Today, Canadian dollars were at 1.33. Last year it was at 1.2. If you are collecting money from other countries, then, again, exchange comes into play. With that also comes in transfer pricing. If you're playing in various jurisdictions, transfer pricing and taxation becomes pretty important. And you, again, as I mentioned earlier, you need to look at pitfalls and opportunities, tax saving opportunities, and consult with people. One thing I've utilized in my career is EDC insurance. It's a low-cost, effective tool where when you're selling internationally, there is not just insurance, but also financing available. So look at all those financing sources. It's cheap capital compared to, say, issuing equity. Finally, I feel that as part of finance strategy, a regular review of insurance policies is a must. What held true, let's say earlier you were shipping everything out. Now you've got more domestic customers or other way around, but you need to revise your insurance. Revenues have grown above. Do you need to revise some of those business interruption policies, etc.? Mm-hmm. So all those things have to form part of the financial and operational strategy.
Okay, a great answer. So let's say that you're about 6 months into the year and you're not hitting revenue targets. How would you navigate a situation like that, and what would you prioritize?
Sure. Again, I think one needs to look at both from a strategy or a long-term point of view, but also from an operational point of view. So let's start with strategy. Revisit with the team. Is it time to rethink our strategy? Take inventory. Why did the revenue decline? Why is our revenue declining? How long would it take for this trend to continue? Is there something wrong with our product? Is further development needed? And this is all about allocating resources and sustainability for the company. Does our strategy still hold true, or do we need to divest part of our business or acquire something to make sure that we are around? From an operational point of view, I start with a review of sales forecasts, and I really get into this, right? I dig in to see how each of my sales team member performing. Have they been able to bring in the numbers that they said? And they could be conservative, but as long as their forecasts were accurate, I have confidence that I can count on those numbers. And then I come up with my own sales forecast. And, as I say, again, build my scenarios to determine what is the right cash burn I need and where do I need to reallocate resources. I look at line by line on every cost item. If we need to cut costs, how deep do we go? Investment. Do we need an area where we need to divert investment? If product is solid, should we hire more salespeople or vice versa? Finally, once you have an operation plan that as a CFO you feel comfortable with, go sell it to the team, get a buy-in from them. And once you have that, you fine-tuned it, then only go to the board for approval, get it approved, and start, tightening your belt or whatever it is that came out of that operational plan and start executing.
Okay. So as organizations today are trying to navigate what are fairly uncertain times, including supply chain disruptions, rising fuel costs, hiring challenges, looming recession fears, et cetera, what advice would you give to other CFOs or folks running finance departments today?
These are tough times. And, we haven't, the previous sort of downturns haven't been or previous, I should say, even challenges, maybe not necessarily a downturn, but were short-lived compared to this one. I mean, we started in 2019 and now in 2022, still not gone. So yes, but the fact is this was more gradual for most companies. So there was time to get more agile and flexible. Many of the things I've discussed already apply here, right? You got to do a periodic SWOT analysis, not just once a year, but let's do it as often as needed to make sure that our assumptions still hold true, as this is a very dynamic and rapidly changing environment. This is the time I think CFOs can shine if they have followed what we have discussed today, being more agile and flexible, but at the same time getting to, get to understand your business and the environment that your business runs in. Don't let the burn get out of hand, but at the same time, look at the big picture. Don't be so focused on the burn that you lose the opportunities for growth or, to even survival. Redirect resources. Look at government funding and other grants where the capital is available. Your revenue may decline or get delayed, and costs may increase. Salaries in this competitive environment have gone up. As you mentioned, fuel, materials, etc., have gone up in costs. So it's time to sort of start thinking out of the box. Go to your landlord, ask for a renegotiate your lease. If you have any debt, renegotiate that debt. I was able to do that for one of the companies I advised, and we managed to settle the debt on 10 cents on the dollar. And they were more than happy to get it, right? Supplier contracts, and revisit them. Maybe it's time to talk to a supplier and secure the materials above everybody else. That could mean giving supplier a bonus or aggregating a whole bunch of purchase orders into one so that you can get it. Figure out what is needed at what time, and can we bring all that material in early? Should we look at some new resources for our raw materials? Do we need to raise capital? Now, these times, it may be difficult to raise capital, but it becomes even more important to keep your shareholders aware of the challenges and business conditions, because those are the shareholders you can call upon to support the business in these times. Robin, in summary, I think one needs to be even more proactive in this environment, revise the budgets, get approvals to redirect or reduce the burn before you really need to. So that's the advice I can give today in today's environment.
Yeah, that's some great insights and some great advice for other CFOs, for folks thinking about hiring CFOs or heads of finance. So I appreciate your time today, Praveen. Thank you so much for giving us some input from the CFO point of view, and we'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks. It was good to reconnect. Take care.
Good to see you.